am Shanshan. I sell art on shanshan.co. Today we're going to review Pray to the Devil. So this is a film by Daniel Stamm. Time is 1 hour and 33 minutes, so right around the sweet spot of the time I like, hour and a half. I think most films you can wrap up that way. Action films maybe go longer, drama maybe go longer, but I really like that tight sequence for time. Actors are Jacqueline Byers as Sister Anne, Virginia Madsen plays Dr. Peters, Christian Navarro plays Father Dante, Colin Salmon plays Father Quinn, Ben Cross plays Cardinal Matthews, Nicholas Ralph plays Father Raymond. So this nun, she's working in the Catholic Exorcism Institute, I think that's the name. And basically it's the first one outside of the Vatican that was founded in the 1830s for exorcism. And because of recent trends of increased possession in the public, they've expanded, and now they have one in Boston. They're expanding more because they really are short-staffed to be able to handle all the possessions. So this Sister Anne is given a shot to kind of learn alongside the exorcism priest, which has never been done before. Usually the nuns just do the caring of the patients. Then they look to take care of the, it's very separate. So she's bringing on because she has a special touch with the patients. And so it's expected that she'll really learn and master the craft. The longer she goes into it, it kind of comes out that she has this really dark past that no one knew about. That kind of influences and comes out in Act 3, and you're like, oh my God, you know, kind of Act 3, nice build up to confront her own past. So as far as analysis, it has, you know, a few jump scares, which you always have in a horror film. Obviously you want to be scared, so they only have a few in here, so that's really good because there's more drama build up if you have fewer than more. So I really like that. I mean, I do like Scream, it has a lot of jump scares in it, but this is fun too, just have one or two. So I kind of like that they have very minimal. They have one at the very end of the film, but it's not scary at all because you kind of expect something's going to go bad in a horror film at the end of the film. So that one, it just doesn't work as far as being scary. There's interesting too of this transition from a traditional nun who's given the shot to become kind of an exorcism priest, which has never been done before, in a way that's kind of very typical of Hollywood. They kind of lead the public opinion, very progressive, and so they always kind of move society a little bit. They try to move it a little bit more into the future, and so it's kind of like a Hollywood twist on a traditional religion such as the Catholic Church, which really doesn't want to probably do that. They probably still have this strict separation of priests and nuns, and there's a strong purpose behind that, is to keep them both sexes celibate. And then the reason why they stick up for celibacy is because once those people die and they have any lands, possessions, they fall to the Catholic Church. That's how the Catholic Church became so rich. So as far as ever making the Catholic Church open to getting married and stuff, they won't do it just because that's how they amass so much wealth as a church. Nothing to do with this movie, but a little backstory there. Personally, it stands from this style of genre with a horror film with a Catholic priest involved somehow. I think it's probably the best propaganda, I would say, for the Catholic Church as far as growing their flock, or even just, you know, kind of convincing the younger generation that might be kind of on the fence about joining their parents' Catholicism to be more deeply entwined into the Catholic guilt and the religion. And it has a great symbolism as well. And film is obviously a visual medium, so you need a lot of symbolism, and Protestantism doesn't, it's stripped out a lot of the symbols, whereas Catholicism has like saints and statues, and they cross the thing, and they have beads, and there's a lot of great symbolism that's used in film. And so it's always kind of a nice propaganda thing for the Catholic Church itself. Again, in you know, today's modern horror films, they very rarely use cell phones, which they kind of handle that by doing a lot of films set maybe in the 70s or earlier. And so they get around the fact of people being more isolated, more scary, because obviously you have a cell phone and there's a monster door, you call 911, they're going to be there, and you're like, all right, Jason got arrested. Next story, right? There's no like mass murder. So, you know, that's kind of a quandary, I think, that they face a lot of horror directors. Like, how do you get around this cell phone dilemma that you can just reach help instantly, or Google something like, oh, this guy has a mass murder, let me see how to lock my door, especially, or whatever, you know. So there, you can be a lot smarter nowadays with Google on your phone. And so because this is an isolated community, the nuns and the priests obviously don't have cell phones supposedly. So that creates a lot of isolationism, and paranoia develops, and it sets the stage for people being isolated in something you don't know if it's their mind or they're being possessed. Is it scientific? And so you have a lot of back and forth play there. There's also interesting on the symbolism, color wise. You have Sister Anne starts off with the traditional, very white, pure nun look, you know, white dress completely, with the white top and everything, just a little bit of black. And then she has a gray top later, which, if you don't know, in Catholicism, usually gray is symbolic of. I only know this because when I married my ex-wife, her mom had to go through this as a Catholic, and she lived under Franco in Spain, and it was a pure dictatorship. Catholic Church has way more power than it normally would in a modern society, so they were able to enforce that if you're pregnant before you get married, you have to wear gray. You're not a virgin anymore. So that's what gray symbolizes in the religion itself. And so it's interesting they use gray in this thing for the nuns halfway through, but it's a nice transition from the white to the gray. And then later, and it's obviously symbolizing something with, if you know anything about what the gray symbolizes in the Catholic Church, what it actually means. So for Catholics, it'll really resonate. It didn't resonate for me. First, I just thought, oh, white, gray, and then black. But I thought about it for a while, and the gray is like, that's what gray symbolizes for women in the Catholic Church. If you get married white, you have to be virgin traditionally. You cannot wear white unless you are a virgin. So, obviously the Catholic Church doesn't have the power to enforce that nowadays, but during the Franco's period in the 40s, 50s in Spain, you definitely did have that power. So hence the danger of religion having undue influence in politics. But you could say that with any kind of dictator situation. It could be atheist or religious. They're going to have evil consequences. And finally, she transitioned to black in the very Act 3, which is she's become kind of the exorcist priest. The really interesting thing, too, if you think about the white, gray, black transition, is you see kind of a similar thing with the Star Wars 4 to 6, which Star Wars 4 is obviously the very first Star Wars, where Luke's wearing kind of farmer clothes and he's a happy-go-lucky kind of kid, kind of just wanting to get out of town. And then by the third film, Jedi, he's wearing the solid black clothes. He's like this Jedi final, level of the Jedi Knight kind of thing. And same way, she's transitioned from kind of this innocent nun to she's gone to the exorcism school. She's kind of dealing with that, and then she transitions to the final priesthood kind of in the final film, which, ironically, Star Wars is obviously borrowing from the Catholic Church, because all these symbolism from the Jedi come from, or those colors in the Jedi come from the Catholic Church itself, but also mixed with Nazism that they borrowed from. There's also the secret story of pregnancy that's woven into Act 3, which deepens the plot and stakes in the film. If you don't know, Catholicism as a religion has a lot of shame involved with it. I think a lot of religions have a lot of shame involved with, like, if you do certain things outside of the religious tenets, then you're in trouble, and then sometimes you're even banished outside of the religion or severely punished. Like in Islam, people are stoned to death for cheating on their husbands. It can be pretty crazy of like what happens with religious tenets. But if you think about even a pure government standpoint, they have severe punishments for people also. Like if you sell drugs and you run a cartel, you're sent to the max prison. So that's kind of today's modern, prison system that's been adopted from the church earlier or Islam earlier. So, those are just the modern day forms of what religious prisons were in the past. And there's a lot of layers to this movie, in the sense like the old building is built on the original kind of foundation of the building and have these dungeons in the basement, which they get to in the final Act 3, which is really great. You're like, ooh, there's even a creepier part of the film, creepier part of the building, and there's even a creepier dungeon part of the film, the building itself. The also thing I liked about the film, they have a little bit of shaky cam, so it's a little bit of this, but it's just minor. Like it looks like maybe like this, like I'm showing you now. So very minimal shaky cam, just enough to give it that personal touch. As your viewer, you're kind of in this scary exorcist building, and you're like, oh my god, there might be demons coming out anywhere. So I think in this type of film, a little bit of shaky cam works. As I've said before in other film reviews, I really hate shaky cam. I think they really overuse it since probably the early 2000s. Once Jason Bourne came out, they just kind of all the people that did cameras like, oh, we gotta do it handheld, it's gotta look like handheld, like we're vlogging. You're like, no, you idiots, you're in a film industry. Just shoot it professionally with nice smooth cam shots and up and down, maybe a crane shot, you swoop in. And I just like the classic 90s camera action versus what they do nowadays. I think it's great with the CGI and obviously that, and they got better lenses and you can shoot digitally so you get sharper imagery. But camera action as far as like moving around all the time, it just looks so stupid, and you see that a lot in TV and a lot in film nowadays, where they just overuse it. I think Heat would probably be the best use of shaky cam, where you have the serial killer shot straight on, smooth camera angles, but then you look at the detective and he's kind of moving around because he's like jittery and he's like, and his life's on the line kind of thing. So you have this clear distinction between characters based on shaky cam or smooth camera action. And I think that's a really great use of shaky versus non-shaky camera. But in a lot of today's films, they don't do that. They overuse shaky cam and it just looks crappy to me. It looks like really amateur, like you're imitating the vloggers. Like you're shooting a vlog, shoot a vlog, you know? Like if you're Casey Neistat, you're Casey Neistat. Don't try to pretend to be a Casey Neistat. Either be a good director or not. And there's this really kind of nice intersection for Anne's life. She, you know, she ties up with the end of the film. She's kind of tying up motherhood and her future career path. So it's a really nice kind of, you know, turn up for her, as well as she kind of resolves her childhood trauma, which has a really great backstory for Sister Anne, with her mom being kind of psychotic, you know, maybe possessed, and it's kind of like the psychologist saying, oh, she was probably deranged, you know, she wasn't, you know, possessed. So it's kind of this debate, scientific debate versus possession, which obviously, you know, once psychology came out, it's kind of ruined a lot of the traditional Catholic held beliefs from the church itself, as far as if people are kind of crazy and wacky, then they're probably possessed by the devil and we should burn them alive, which they did in the 1500s, you know. And if you see modern day Islam and some of the more extreme countries like Iran or Saudi Arabia, you're going to see these really extreme like beliefs where, you know, people could, you know, maybe, you know, have witchcraft or something and then they're severely punished, and you're like, what are you talking about? This is just like crazy talking, versus more scientific thoughts on it. I'm not saying the whole population's like that, but kind of the institutions that rule those countries are, you know, they kind of have these weird ideas about religion and don't make any sense with the modern day scientists. So you have a little bit of that debate in this film where, you know, the science versus the possession. That's kind of a nice modern touch there. And yeah, I think it was a really fun film. I don't know if it's worth collecting long term. It's not like The Exorcist, I would say, is probably the best. You know, you go see it again. But even my favorite film, like The Shining, I've seen it maybe 3-4 times, and now it's kind of like I saw in the film, they brought it back to the movies, and it was great to see the movies, but it just didn't have the same impact as it would have when you were younger, and just those kind of films hit harder, I think, in its own time when it comes out. So I guess I missed my mark on The Shining, even though it is one of my favorite horror films. But yeah, I think this is a nice film. They're really well done. It'll be probably timeless, but there's a lot of these Catholic exorcism type of films. So hope you guys like it. Give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.